Antarctica, the continent of ice, freezing temperatures, penguins, and a hidden civilization hiding in the grounds of the icy land. You heard that right, and I'll tell you all about this, the evidence of ancient animals in this place, and dinosaurs, and much, much more. A civilization whose existence has been kept under wraps. There have been whispers saying that humans might have lived in Antarctica way before we ever imagined. It's crazy to think about, right? And the ones who shout the loudest about it are the Hollow Earth theorists. They believe that the South Pole is a gateway into an underground world. This idea has existed for centuries and has been discussed by many famous people, such as Edmund Halley in the late 1600s, John Cleves Simms Jr., and J.N. Reynolds in the 1800s. But that's not all. Some studies propose that Antarctica, India, and Africa were once part of the supercontinent Gondwana, and then they broke apart around 80 million years ago. And guess what? Theorists allege that during this time, Antarctica was actually full of life. There were animals and plants, and the landscape was pretty flat with a slow-moving river. The Antarctica, that is now believed to look like a leftover from the Ice Age, was once full of greenery everywhere. But here's where it gets really interesting. There's another theory called the crustal displacement theory that suggests humans could have still been living in parts of Antarctica as recently as 12,000 years ago. And there's some evidence to support this theory. Some ancient maps from cultures like the Egyptians and Sumerians show that Antarctica wasn't always covered in ice. For example, there's a map created by Turkish Admiral Piri Reis in 1513 that shows an ice-free Antarctica. Another map from the 1530s by Orontius Phineas shows the mountains and rivers of the continent. These maps closely resemble the modern map of Antarctica, minus the ice, which strongly suggests that humans may have once inhabited this region in a hospitable climate. Pretty wild, huh? Apparently, scientists also discovered 3 large pyramids and evidence of plant and animal life, including human beings, under the thick layers of ice. Here you have to ask yourself a question. Why didn't stuff like this ever make it to the news? Are the higher-ups hiding something? I believe they are. But if you're still not convinced, hear me out. There's also this letter allegedly written by a submarine seaman who claimed that they received detailed instructions and maps from a German army general to navigate to specific coordinates in Antarctica, which led them to enter underground caverns and discover the Hollow Earth. And apparently the war records do list that submarine, which was named U-209, as missing. Now, I'm not saying any of this is true, but I'm also not denying it, because why is there so much secrecy surrounding a continent that's literally just ice? And why is there another person who claims the same thing happened to him? The naval officer who saw a crystal city in Antarctica underground. The other person I'm referring to is none other than Admiral Richard E. Byrd, a Medal of Honor recipient and a highly decorated naval officer and explorer who led the largest expedition to Antarctica, Operation High Jump, in 1946 to 1947. But he didn't come back with just this accomplishment. Instead, he brought a discovery to his name. So here's how it goes. In August 1946, Byrd organized Operation High Jump, the largest expedition ever to travel to Antarctica. With 13 ships, 23 aircraft, and over 4,700 military personnel, the mission had multiple goals, including investigating potential military bases in Antarctica. But during his explorations, something unexpected happened. According to his diary, Admiral Byrd discovered an entrance to the center of the Earth through the South Pole. And as one would, he flew under the Earth and over the pole. He expected a frozen wasteland, but what he saw was a surprise. The temperature was mild, and they saw greenery everywhere. Suddenly, he saw something that defied explanation. A city made of crystal that shimmered like a rainbow. But the surprises didn't end there. As he flew closer, his airplane was taken control of by flying objects that looked like discs. UFOs. Probably. Soon enough, they were led to the ground and taken into a huge underground cave. There, he came across a being whom Admiral Byrd called the Master in his diary. According to Byrd, the being expressed concern about how humans were handling nuclear weapons. It was disappointed with the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki and hoped that humanity would learn to refrain from such destructive actions. However, after his encounter, Admiral Byrd was ordered to remain silent, and everything he said was classified. The first ones to discover Antarctica were Polynesians. Many history books credit the discovery of Antarctica to Westerners who spotted it in 1820, but the recent study suggests that indigenous explorers from Polynesia, led by Huita Rangiora, also known as Uita Rangiora, arrived there on the vessel Te Iwi o Atea in the early 600 s. That means they discovered Antarctica even before the Maori people arrived in New Zealand, around 1200 to 1300. The study, authored by conservation biologist Priscilla Wehi and colleagues at the University of Otago in New Zealand, examined oral histories from various Maori groups that documented the navigational achievements of Polynesian explorers. According to these histories, the Polynesians were skilled at navigating the Pacific and were able to find Antarctica despite the harsh conditions. Here, I have to mention that indigenous peoples in the Pacific have long been recognized for their navigational skills, which allowed them to travel vast distances by sea. For example, the Maori were known to travel the Pacific with ease, much like Western explorers might cross a lake. So, what did the Polynesians see when they arrived in Antarctica? According to accounts from Maori ethnographer Elsden Best, the explorers were amazed by the wonderful things they encountered, such as rocks that grew out of the sea, monstrous waves, and a frozen sea of pia, which is a type of seaweed. They also came across various sea creatures, including a deceitful animal of the sea who dives to great depths. There were even some strange-looking rocks that were super tall and didn't have any plants growing on them. There was a time when Antarctica had forests. What if I told you that well-preserved fossil leaves were discovered in the east of the Antarctic Peninsula? These leaves had been trapped within layers of sedimentary rock for millions of years until they were recently studied by a team of researchers from the University of Melbourne. Dr. Anne-Marie Tossolini and Professor David Cantrill led a 2-month expedition to Seymour Island, where they collected the fossil leaves. What they found was surprising: evidence that forests had grown at high latitudes over 56 to 58 million years ago. Now, I know the first thought that comes to mind is, it's just a leaf. Why is it even important? Well, because back in the day, everyone thought Antarctica was just a giant ice cube with no room for plants. I mean, who would want to live in a freezer, right? But guess what? It turns out that Antarctica used to be a botanical paradise. The fossil leaves revealed how there were forests, a lot more diverse than we thought. From cool to warm temperate, mixed conifer broad, left evergreen and deciduous forests, there was quite a bit of variety. This is not the first time that scientists have explored the region. In fact, the first fossil collections were made by Otto von Nordenskjöld and the Swedish South Polar Expedition in 1901. However, this recent discovery provides a new perspective on the history of the Antarctic forests and the life that once thrived there. These leaves have remained untouched for millions of years, preserved in the sandstone and siltstones on Seymour Island. They've revealed that these forests were part of the ancient southern hemisphere supercontinent known as Gondwana, which stretched from Australia through Antarctica to South America. Although there are no modern-day species that can compare to the ancient Antarctic forests, the closest resemblance can be found in the southern Patagonian forests of South America. Not to mention, many plant groups considered unique to Australia also occurred in South America during this time. Why? Because Antarctica acted as a gateway for the exchange of Southern Hemisphere floras. Interestingly, the Paleocene fossil forests on the east side of the Antarctic Peninsula are markedly different from those found on the west side. Previous studies suggest this difference may be due to the presence of volcanoes on the east side, which create a rain shadow or perhaps differences in altitude between the forests growing on the volcanic mountain flanks. Fossils revealed the ecosystem of Antarctica millions of years ago. In late November 2016, two adventurous geologists from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, Eric Gulbrandsen and John Isbell, were scaling the frozen slopes of the McIntyre Promontory in the Transantarctic Mountains. But they weren't just there for the views. They were on a mission to uncover the secrets of a time long gone. Their target? An era that took place over 252 million years ago during the Permian-Triassic mass extinction. This event marked the end of the world as it was known, wiping out up to 95% of all species on Earth. Yikes. And by the end of their expedition, they had struck gold. Or rather, fossils. They found 13 fossil fragments from trees dating back over 260 million years ago, making them some of the oldest fossils in the world. Back then, the world was a very different place. The continent was much warmer and more humid than it is today, with a landscape that was densely forested and a low-diversity network of resilient plants that could withstand polar extremes. Think of it like the boreal forest in present-day Siberia. And it's not just the trees that were preserved. Fossil microorganisms and fungi were also found inside the wood. It's like a time capsule of life from over 260 million years ago. The researchers who discovered these incredible plants also found that they could transition rapidly between seasons. Unlike modern plants, take months to adjust to changing temperatures and conserve water differently depending on the time of day. The ancient trees could fluctuate quickly between pitch-black winters and perpetually sunny summers. Million-year-old DNA was discovered. Recently, scientists made an incredible discovery: a million-year-old DNA trapped in ancient sediment. Yes, you heard that right. It was found in the Scotia Sea just north of Antarctica during IODP Expedition 382. The DNA found in sediments up to 178 meters deep in the ocean floor belongs to organisms known as eukaryotes, which have a nucleus and membrane-bound organelles. And as you probably know by now, this discovery tells us about how the marine ecosystem has changed over time. But fun fact: these fragments of DNA are the oldest authenticated marine sedimentary DNA discovered to date, and it has been preserved all thanks to the very low temperatures and oxygen concentrations, as well as an absence of UV radiation. The sedimentary DNA analysis has revealed that about 540,000 years ago, the abundance of diatoms, a type of phytoplankton, suddenly exploded. These tiny creatures are the basis of many marine food webs, and their rapid growth and reproduction were likely fueled by the warming phase that the Earth was undergoing at the time. The increased ice loss from Antarctica's ice sheet and rising ocean temperatures were the perfect conditions for these little guys to thrive. It's crazy to think that technology has developed so much that we can track what happened a million years ago. Fossil of a giant sea creature that resembles the Loch Ness Monster. In Antarctica, back in the Mesozoic era, the great theropod Cryolophosaurus ellioti dinosaurs roamed the land, while other reptilian beasts ruled the waters. One of these marine creatures was the heftiest of the plesiosaur line, an elasmosaur, discovered on the famously fossil-rich Seymour Island along the Antarctic Peninsula and described in 2019. This massive elasmosaur is believed to be a member of the Aristocnectes genus, measured almost 40 feet long and weighed a whopping 15 tons. The elasmosaur's skull was large, and its neck was shorter compared to other elasmosaurids, making it unique and fascinating to paleontologists. The fossil was actually found in 1989, but it took decades upon decades to excavate due to harsh weather conditions and logistical challenges. This sea monster lived a mere 30,000 years before the devastating Cretaceous-Paleogene extinction event that wiped out non-avian dinosaurs and many other large animals. A giant hole. This Polynia was found in the Weddell Sea of Antarctica. Now, I know what you're thinking. What in the world is a Polynia? It's basically a big hole in the ice that opens up in the polar regions, surrounded by sea ice and sustained by winds or ocean heat. Think of it like a little pocket of open water in the middle of a frozen ocean. These can be caused by a few different things, like strong winds blowing ice out of an area, or the rising of warmer water from below. Coastal polynias form right at the coast when strong winds blow ice away from the area. Open ocean polynias, on the other hand, are caused by warmer and saltier water rising from below. This warm water melts the ice away to create a polynia. But what's the big deal with these polynias? Well, they can actually impact the ocean's temperature and even the climate regionally and globally. When a polynia forms, it exposes relatively warmer ocean waters to a cold atmosphere, leading to a large exchange of heat, which drives deep convection in the ocean. This can modify the oceanic circulation and impact the climate. Scientists from the University of Toronto and the Southern Ocean Carbon and Climate Observations and Modeling Project first spotted this one using satellite technology. They were just trying to monitor a similar, much smaller hole that opened the previous year. But then they noticed this one, and it wasn't that big, but it kept growing with time, at quite a speed. At first, it was only about 4,250 square miles, but within a week, it had grown to a whopping 31,000 square miles. Recent research found that intense cyclones occurring far south from the ice edge were responsible for its reoccurrence. During some winter months, the atmosphere around Antarctica exhibits a strong pattern that favors the development of the polar cyclones closer to the coast. These cyclones occur over specific oceanographic areas that are preconditioned for polynia formation. The last time something like this was seen was way back in the 1970s. A hole in the ozone layer. Then, in 2023, scientists revealed something about the ozone layer found in the Earth's stratosphere. This layer is what protects us from the harmful UV rays of the sun. The scientists found that the hole in the ozone layer located above Antarctica had grown to be the largest it's ever been. Can you believe it? The Antarctic ozone hole, which had been causing concern for decades, reached its maximum size at a whopping 10 million square miles. With global warming and the depletion of the ozone layer, many people are worried about Antarctica's future, but there's some good news. NASA scientist Paul Newman says that in general, the hole in the ozone layer should hopefully grow smaller over time. Phew, that's a relief. Age of Antarctica's ice finally confirmed. Scientists have confirmed the age of an Antarctic ice sample using a pretty cool technology called krypton dating. Basically, this technique relies on the isotopic composition of krypton, a gas that doesn't hang around in near-surface water for very long. And the result? 0.120000-year-old ice. Who knows what other secrets that frozen water is holding on to? And if we can better understand the mechanisms that cause the planet to shift into and out of ice ages, we might just be able to avoid another Ice Age movie sequel. A shipwreck from the last century. The steam yacht Endurance is a ship that has its own story to tell. Owned by explorer Ernest Shackleton, the Endurance sank in 1915 during an Antarctic expedition. Recently, in March 2022, a South African polar research team discovered the wreck of the Endurance at a depth of 9,869 feet beneath West Antarctica's Weddell Sea. The ship is remarkably well preserved, with the name Endurance still visible across the stern. It's almost as if time has stood still since the day it sank. The ship was found only about 4 nautical miles, which is about 7 kilometers south of the location fixed by the ship's captain, Frank Worsley. But how did the Endurance come to sink? It was trapped in dense pack ice in the Weddell Sea during the Imperial Trans-Antarctic Expedition led by Sir Ernest Shackleton in 1915. The ship became frozen in the ice after attempts to free it were unsuccessful, leading to the pressure of the ice crushing the ship. Ultimately, on November 21, 1915, the crew had to abandon the Endurance as it sank into the ocean due to the relentless pressure of the ice, marking the end of their intended Antarctic land crossing. An enormous icefish breeding colony was discovered. In the early days of 2021, a team of German scientists discovered something truly amazing. They found the biggest fish breeding colony you could ever imagine, hidden away in the icy depths of the Antarctic Weddell Sea, right under the Filchner ice shelf. This colony is huge. It spreads out over an area of at least 150 square miles and is home to around 60 million active icefish nests. That's the same as over 60,000 tons or 135 million pounds of biomass. Wow! The majority of the nests are looked after by a single adult fish who is guarding over 1,700 eggs. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button for more content like this. See you next time.